All right. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Neeraj Tolia. I was the co-founder and CEO of Kasten before we joined Veeam roughly 6 months ago or so. I have been using Kubernetes personally since roughly 2015. And Kasten as a product has been around for rough 4.5 years right now. Personally, I've had a lot of experience with backup, with storage. So I've been working in that for my entire life, starting from my PhD at Carnegie Mellon, all the way through different companies, right? And now currently at Veeam and really enjoying what I'm doing. And today, what I'm going to talk about is just kick things off, and I'll be there for the rest of the session to answer questions also at the end. But just as a reminder, again, for some of you that might be new, when we look at Kasten by Veeam today, our mission hasn't changed compared to what it was 4 years ago. It is still to help enterprises deploy their applications at scale and take care of their day-to data management challenges for them. So when we talk about day two, right, the use cases we cover include backup and recovery. It includes application mobility, whether you think about it cross-cluster, cross-cloud, cross AZ, cross storage system, and then disaster recovery. Now, before I jump into what we're going to talk about today, I do want to talk about a quarter that ended in March. Right? Trevor is also here. Trevor runs sales for us, all the hard questions. So this one, go to him. But really want to give a little bit of update on how the business is doing. Very happy to say, right, we had revised our forecast, slightly upwards at the end of last year. And we still beat that by over 30% in just last quarter. So when we go look at our ARR within just the Kasten by Veeam business, it was over 2x what we did the previous quarter. And the deals are large, right? So again, we focus on the enterprise. So our average deal size was over $90,000, and we had a mix of large deals and smaller renewals. But the other thing to notice here when we talk about renewals is they're relatively small, but we are seeing quarter-over-quarter renewals. So the renewals we saw this quarter, we had the deal last quarter. So this we also seeing across customers, where we get that initial footprint and then we're expanding quickly. We don't wait for the yearly or multi-year renewal. This is really happening quarter-over-quarter. We've had customers that have renewed 4 or expanded 4 or 5 times. And yes, maybe I shouldn't be using the word renewal. These are actually expansions. And so we have customers that have expanded 4 or 5 times in 2 or 3 quarters. So again, we are seeing this over and over. But we're not resting on the laurels. And that's why, that's the theme of the entire session today, where we're seeing increased asks from customers around ransomware. They are both in terms of traditional attack vectors. You try to come in through the database, through some OS level compromise that are coming in. But there's an increased concentration where it's not just companies like Kasten that are going all in on Kubernetes, but also malware groups that are saying there's an increasing footprint here. This is what we're going to target. It's also right now, sometimes security postures aren't as well baked as we all would like them to be. So we are seeing this across the board today. And the flip side of that problem is that Kubernetes recovery is complex in this environment. As you all probably know, we're seeing more Kubernetes being deployed at the edge. We're seeing much larger footprints. We need systems that can protect people's applications, people's data, to fit in extremely small factors, to move at the rapid pace that applications move at. So there's a lot to unpack here. And we'll be talking about some of this over the rest of the next hour or two. But I'm going to stop here and hand things over, I believe, to Gaurav now. But as I said, I'll be looking over chat. I'm here for the rest of the day. If you have any questions, right, we can take them one-on-one later or online. All right, so I'm going to stop here and hand things off.
Thanks, Neeraj. So thank you everyone for joining. I know we are facing some sort of slide issues, so here's what I'm going to ask for. I'm going to share my deck, but please let me know if you feel like the slides are either stuck or there's another issue. So give me a second. put this into slideshow mode. Do you see Kasten K10 4.0 on your screens?
Looks good, Gaurav.
Thank you very much. All right, please let me know if they get stuck. So with that said, my name is Gaurav Rishi. I'm the VP of Product here at Kasten by Veeam. And as Tom pointed out, super excited to talk to you about what we have been up to, and also now as a part of Veeam, how we've almost accelerated our innovation. I know a lot of you might be familiar with Kasten K10, but a very super quick journey in terms of our various releases so you kind of understand the context of how we got 4.0. Now, 2.0, when we introduced it, we talked about security just because Kasten has been focused on backup and recovery, as Neeraj was sharing, and security is, of course, the key tenet. And that's been something that we innovated along with making sure it's Kubernetes native, integrated with the RBAC schemes there, and simplicity. Again, Kubernetes is a young ecosystem, relatively speaking, a little more than 6 years old. And so we don't expect people to be Kubernetes experts just to be able to go ahead and protect their applications. So ease of use has been something that has been a core tenet, and that's what 2.0 was about. When we came to 2.5, we started talking about introducing new constructs that help us sort of eat our own dog food. So in other words, we introduced cloud native data engine technologies because we realized that all the things that had been developed in the past did not necessarily scale up, did not use some of the powerful constructs like serverless architectures, et cetera, when they talked about going ahead and moving data efficiently across. And it wasn't just about the data path, it was also about powerful transformation capabilities, which customers have sort of since loved. So having dynamic bindings where you could go ahead and take an application, but then move them over to another Kubernetes version or change your underlying infrastructure where maybe it was initially introduced on spinning media, but then you went and rehydrated your application on SSDs. That was something which we introduced back in 2.5, and that application transfer engine has been sort of really loved by customers, and we see that in use. Back in November 3.0 of 2020, we talked about seeing the scale. So, a couple of years back, I know it was still a question about how do we see deployments going out in the Kubernetes world? You have one large cluster, but I think now it's quite common to have multiple clusters. People have limited blast radius. It's much more efficient. You can go and fine tune the amount of hardware you might require in that. And so having a multi-cluster view where it was easy for you to go ahead and operate your Kubernetes applications at scale, as well as protect them, was extremely important. And having the self-service portals where you could go ahead and operate on it without stepping on other stores was where multi-tenancy came in. And so that just sort of gives you a flavor of how we've been scaling up. Now with 4.0, you'll see some of these same themes actually show up, but in different lights. And so security, I think one of the biggest issues the industry is seeing today is around ransomware. And so we are quite happy to be going ahead and introducing the first Kubernetes native ransomware protection solution from with Kasten K10 4.0. And I'll get into some of the details there. And the second one is we are still seeing a tremendous growth in not just in the Kubernetes application and deployments there. I think some of the sales numbers that Neeraj was focusing on reflect that, but we're also seeing a huge amount of innovation across the entire vendor base, whether it's the storage, Kubernetes infrastructure, or the data services. And I'll share a few updates since our last release in terms of what we've been doing there. Then finally, simplicity is, I think, been one of the core tenets right from our 2.0 release, and you'll see some of those benefits that we talk about. So those three capabilities are really what I want to focus on when we talk about 4.0. But let me first start with ransomware. And again, quick check. I'm assuming you guys can see the ransomware protection slide. I'll take that as a yes.
That's a yes.
So, all right. So, I think the obvious question which comes up is, why are containers vulnerable? And, there is a longer list, but I did want to hit on sort of three issues that we see commonly exploited when we talk to our customer base and what we see happening in the industry. The first one is over-permissioning. So here, Kubernetes admin clusters are going ahead assigning privileges to users as well as applications. And a lot of times during installation time or as operations scale up, we don't see that privilege separation that is important. And we do see hackers going ahead and exploiting that to be able to go and get access to resources or Kubernetes API servers to then go ahead and get into your clusters. And that's one common issue. The second one is Kubernetes is still coming up with a new release every quarter. In addition to that, you do see CVEs and there are patches. At times, there are not patches made available by vendors, and that's an issue by itself. Kasten, in fact, did make a patch available for some of the vulnerabilities we have just because we are up to speed in some of these things, but that's not necessarily a reflection of the entire industry. And even if patches are available, some organization or customers might not be keeping their operations up to date in terms of the latest versions of either Kubernetes or some of the security patches that have been put out. And that then spills over and creates new attack surface areas. The third one, which actually always astounds me, and maybe I'm living the backup and recovery world, is how many applications are still not covered under a backup and a recovery policy. And so that creates a huge gap and makes things quite vulnerable. And we do hope that events like this, as well as what we are doing as far as innovation is concerned with K10 and protecting that, helps with it. But the point I'll make here is the attacks are getting more and more sophisticated, where we have hackers now focused on Kubernetes to go ahead and exploit ransomware-related issues. And it's not just about going ahead and maybe encrypting what's in your cluster, because people might just be able to rebuild that. They also go ahead and start attacking your target stores. And that actually ends up being a huge problem area because, of course, backups are your last line of defense, and people are looking to rely on that to get back to something that they really care about. So when we go ahead and looked at our customer base to ask, what do you really need to do to have a ransomware protection solution, we got some answers which I think are probably top of mind and obvious for you too, which is essentially they wanted to go ahead and first of all, make sure that backup integrity is preserved. And this is for the entire application, not just one database or just one storage volume. They wanted that holistic piece. And given that ransomware is actually something where you're going ahead and trying to recover under an environment where there is somebody breathing down your neck, time is of a premium. You wanted to make sure that you could work in easy operations. So back to that simplicity point I was making earlier, and do it extremely effectively from a timing perspective. So that's what's top of mind too. And then finally, I think to get the ransom out of ransomware, you need things to be cost effective. You can't just push the problem from one side to another. And what I mean by that is, if it's not the ransomware, you didn't want to get tied to a particular vendor where only if you lived in that cloud or if you live with that particular storage solution, would you be able to go ahead and get the protection. So that is another concern which is top of mind for our customers. So with that said, when we now introduce Kasten K10, there are a few key points I'll just highlight, and you'll see a demonstration of this right after me. But immutability is sort of core, and there has been innovation done across the industry, including by object storage vendors, where write once, read many turns out to be something that is important. Veeam itself in VDR have gone ahead and leveraged that. And now in the context of Kubernetes, we are really happy to announce that we are going ahead and bringing that into a fold where we let customers still work in the context of automation by using policies. But not only can you set policies which are forward-looking, so as soon as an application is introduced into your cluster, it's automatically protected. They can also set retention periods in terms of how long should that particular application be completely untouchable as far as target storage is concerned. And all of this can be done by getting us up and running and getting selective restores done just in a matter of minutes, and you'll actually see this yourself. And then this has always been true, but I'll sort of go ahead and highlight a few more points. Freedom of choice, whether it's deployment architectures, hybrid, just purely on a particular cloud or multiple clouds, or storage or a mix of storage vendors, that's been at the heart of Kasten's design. we don't take sides in that context. And that's turning out to be something which helps customers get the best solution, the most cost-effective solution that is interesting for them. And then I think I'll also quickly touch on the next generation data engine piece of it, which I talked about as 2.5 to get to that next level of security. So with that said, like I talked about, we do have scale coming up. And so I do want to touch on a few key partnerships since our last release. One is HPE. HPE, of course, has storage, and we are integrated with Primera, Nimble, Cloud Volumes, and that's using CSI. But we've also recently announced we've got integrations with Ezmeral, which is HPE's integrations on production of the Kubernetes distribution. Veeam's always had HPE as a strong partner, and we're happy to sort of take this to the next frontier in context of Kubernetes. And we're already seeing customers sort of using this. The second one, we definitely see a lot of Red Hat OpenShift deployed, especially on premises, but increasingly there are advancements Red Hat has made in terms of things like Arrow, Azure Red Hat OpenShift, where it's available also on clouds. And now we have certified with Red Hat, as well as we've gone ahead and integrated deeply, and we were a launch partner with things like OCS, which is the Red Hat OpenShift container storage solution. And it's not just about that, it's also about the hyperconverged vendors like Nutanix, who have Carbon, where we've gone ahead and got AHV certification, where Carbon, which is their Kubernetes distribution, is included along with it. And then last but definitely not the least that I just want to highlight is we've always had Microsoft Azure as one of our partners, but it's not just about cloud protection. We've also gone ahead and done integrations with Microsoft Azure Stack, which takes this protection over to on-premises. So we're definitely seeing, like I said, a deployment set of architectures which span across the gamut of wherever you might have your application workloads. And then I think from a perspective of object storage, rich and growing set of vendors, like I talked about, a lot of them are now supporting immutability, whether it's S3 or whether it's MinIO, you'll see us integrated in there. And then as far as the data services are concerned, we see that as a growing list too, to give you that level of data mutability. And then I did touch on this, but I do want to talk about how we've extended this with version 4.0, something that we had talked about in the context of 2.5. We've had the cloud native data engine, which is the next generation data engine. And a lot of these constructs are open source because we do want everybody to go ahead and build off this and get the right level of innovation. But the point to make out here is not only do we have the backups at the storage level, we can also, for applications that need that higher level of granularity and consistency, support backups at the database level. So we support that using the cloud native data engine to get you the benefits of compression and scale using these serverless constructs. And on top of that, we've gone ahead and figured out that there are some patterns which we commonly see in the world of SQL and relational databases in the cloud native building blocks. And we've always gone ahead and kept pace with increasing the number of blueprints, as we call them, that are available so customers can use them. And these are, again, open source. So what we are announcing is additional blueprints for Kafka, Amazon Aurora, which is a part of the RDS family, and Cassandra. So you can actually go to canister.io and actually see a growing list of that. But we are extremely happy to see the advancement, not just in terms of storage, the Kubernetes distributions, but also advancing it up the stack to the data services layer. And then I'll probably stop here and let the demo sort of show you this. But the ease of use is something that I pointed out as the third part of our release focus. And this one, we've taken it to the next level where not only do we have the continued multi-cluster operations, we've actually gone ahead and made it even simpler, where with these self-service portals, users can go ahead and have a secure self-service area to figure out and look at applications across the primary and secondary clusters and operate just on them. And they can have policies which make sure that you don't have those continuity gaps that we talked about that we see as one of the common exploits in the ransomware context. And then as far as the backup restore is concerned, we want to continue to make it easy. So in addition to object stores, we have NFS as a target. And as our sales are growing, we want to make sure that our licensing stays as simple as possible. Very easy for us to be, sized. We are sized based on a dollar per node basis. We don't tax people on their core strategic asset, which is their data. Another philosophical alignment with Veeam in that context. And now people can also stack licenses as their cluster sizes and number of nodes grow. So I think I might have hit my 15-minute mark, but so much to talk about. As you can probably sense, we are super excited about this. It's a very feature-rich release, but at the same time, we are thankful for all the attention and also, of course, the partnerships and the growing customer base. So with that step,
thank you, Gaurav.
I'll just stop at the demo part. Thanks, Tom.
Gaurav, can you still continue to the next 2 slides, please, so that Nick can start sharing with the demo?
Absolutely. So, so do you want me to talk about this one, or?
I think Nick can jump in here, but he doesn't
yeah.
have the slides.
Sure.
Oh yeah. So thanks. So you'll be handling the slides for this one.
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay. So yeah, my name is Nick. I'm an engineer at Kasten. I'll be presenting a demo of the immutable backup feature that'll be part of the K10 4.0 release. To do so, I'll be simulating a 2-pronged ransomware attack, both on the live data and on the application backups. I'll demonstrate that K10 can quickly and successfully recover my application with its data intact after this attack. And so the setup is as follows. I have a very important production application running in my Kubernetes cluster. For simplicity in this demo, it's a MySQL database containing all of my very important account data. I've been backing it up frequently using K10 and exporting the restore points to an S3 bucket. Most importantly, the bucket I'm exporting to has object locking enabled. This means that any version of an object in the bucket can have a retention period applied to it. And that means that no one, not even an admin, can delete or tamper with that data during that retention period. So next slide, please. Yeah. To demonstrate that, I'll be taking on the role of an attacker. This attacker has compromised the Kubernetes cluster and has additionally succeeded in sniffing out the object store credentials. I'll start the attack by encrypting the live data directly in the application database. Then I'll attack the object store bucket where K10 has been exporting its restore points. I can then contact the victim to ransom back their very important data for a hefty price. So after the attack succeeds, I'll resume the role of the victim who has just realized their predicament, and I'll demonstrate that a restore from an immutable backup held off-site in the object lock bucket can thwart that ransomware attack and recover their critical data. So at this point, I'd like to share my screen. Okay. So here's our K10 dashboard. I've got my production application, my important production application. It is a MySQL database with a PVC installed. You guys can all see my screen, correct? Perfect.
Yes.
And I've got just sort of a connection to my MySQL database here. So you can see here's a table of my very important account data with a list of names and balances, that I need to preserve and I want to be able to protect. So to do so, I have set up a policy. I've called it locked policy, and it is protecting my production app. And what it does is it takes a snapshot hourly and exports each of those hourly snapshots to an object store that's pointed to by this locking profile. This profile called locking profile, which points to an S3 bucket called Kasten ransomware demo locked. And as you can see, it's got object locking enabled and has a protection period of 30 days, which correlates to the immutable retention period that's applied to objects in this bucket. And again, objects with retention applied can't be tampered with. So as you can see, the policy is already executed several times, running backups and exports of my application and sending it to the locked bucket. We can take a look at that locked bucket here. This is the bucket in question, Kasten ransomware demo locked. And you can see here's the exported restore point data that K10 has pushed to the bucket underneath this K10 prefix. If we take a look at the properties, we can confirm that object lock is enabled for this bucket with some default retention period applied to it. And additionally, bucket versioning is enabled, and buckets that have object locking applied will always have versioning enabled as well. So now I'm going to put on my attacker hat and see if we can't attack this bucket here. So I am now going to be playing the role of the attacker. I've compromised this Kubernetes cluster. I've been silently watching it for a few months. In that time, I've seen this important looking application, and I've watched K10 take backups and export them to S3. And I've been able to sniff out that S3 provider credentials, and now I'm ready to attack. So I have a script that is going to find that important data table and start encrypting that data. So if I go database attack, so it's found the table and implied encryption on top of that. So now I have the data encrypted. I've got what I want. I want the victims to pay me for access to their data. So I don't really want them to simply restore it from one of their backups. So I want to prevent that as much as possible. So I'm going to run another script now that is going to delete all of the objects in their object store, since I have compromised the credentials for that as well. So I'll run a bucket attack script that I've created. And objects deleted. So now that I've encrypted their data, I'm holding it ransom. I've deleted their backup data. They won't be able to restore from that, as far as I can tell. Now all that's left is for me to contact the victim for payment. Okay, now I'm going to go back to playing the role of the victim once more. I'm going to check up on my mission critical data, and uh-oh, that doesn't look good. All the values have been replaced with blob in my GUI here. Let's take a look up. Yeah, it looks like they've turned to encrypted or otherwise garbage data. That's kind of worrying. Now let's check up on my backups in the S3 bucket that I've been exporting to. Just refresh that, and no objects. Yeah, so that looks pretty scary until I remember that I'm using a bucket with object locking enabled. And if I just check the list versions here, yep. K10's data still seems to be intact, so theoretically, K10 should be able to find that and restore from it. So let's start a restore. Signed out. So let's start a restore from one of the restore points. Let's just pick, say, the most recent one, that exported restore point, and start the restore. So we should see that start up very soon. It's pending right now. And we've started our restore operation. So it's worth mentioning while we wait here that if the attacker has compromised the Kubernetes cluster, then K10 might possibly have also been compromised. So I've sort of glossed over this for simplicity, but K10 already supports disaster recovery of its own data. And so now immutability adds another layer of security, as K10 can also protect itself with this exact same mechanism. And so for this demo scenario, we're assuming we can bring up K10 intact, and then we need to recover our data from, our application data from a restore point that's living in that compromised object store bucket. I suppose it's also worth mentioning that this type of protection extends to other potential avenues of data loss, not just ransomware attacks or other malicious activity. So maybe an engineer accidentally empties your bucket with all of your backups in it. Accidents do happen. So using an object locking bucket to make K10's backups immutable will also protect against other forms of attack, not just malicious malware or ransomware type attacks. So we can monitor the progress here. I'll make use of this hacker's terminal. And it looks like we're already in the process of initializing. We have our MySQL store pod. So we're just waiting for this to come ready. And so as soon as it comes ready, I'm going to just go ahead and double check that all of my important data is intact once again. Looks like we're almost there. Status running, not quite ready yet. And there we go. So we're back up and running already. We should show the restore finishing anytime soon here. And it's complete. And yeah, took 3 minutes, 6 seconds from start to finish to recover all my application data. And we can check that it's there as well. If we just refresh this. Let's just reopen that. Let me get my password. Check my table. And there it is. Just the way we left it. Good as new. Okay, so in conclusion, with the release of 4.0, K10 will be able to support the immutable backups feature so that even in the face of a ransomware attacker that's compromised both the Kubernetes cluster and the object store credentials and deleted or otherwise tampered with the backups that were exported there, K10 will still be able to recover that critical application data. So I'll wrap up there and I'll pass it off to our head of sales, Trevor, for further talk.
Thank you, Nick.
Awesome. Thank you, Nick. All right, let me go ahead and share. All right, well, so thank you all. My name is Trevor Syme. I run sales for Kasten. Really excited to follow a great demo and talk about some of the things that our customers are achieving with Kasten. So what I'll do is I'm going to just quickly run through a couple of quick scenarios where some of our customers are focused on and how they've been successful with Kasten. What we'll do is we'll run through a couple of use cases where being native to Kubernetes had sizable advantages. We'll talk about a financial services firm that was in Europe with some very security-centric requirements. We'll talk about how this customer used our product. And we'll talk about some of the other use cases with some of our service providers, giving them freedom of choice and flexibility with a Kasten platform, and why ease of use is paramount and why customers like Onyx Corp chose our technology. So if we get into it, we'll start with Demodern. And Demodern is a digital agency. They are a customer of ours that was really struggling with a variety of challenges when moving to cloud native and protecting their digital assets in this cloud native environment. Right. They are a extraordinarily fast-paced team. They work in the largest of firms with customers like Mazda, Daimler, Royal Caribbean, Nestle. And the pace of play at this organization means that projects are generated, projects are deployed and projects are then terminated, relatively quickly. And their existing data management strategies and their existing data management tool sets didn't meet their needs for an agility perspective. They were also, struggling with providing app-centric data management tools in place that weren't built for Kubernetes, really focused just on the data. And by just focusing on the data, their recovery experience was complex. It didn't align to their streamlined workflows, their streamlined process, and their short, bench of people. And they really were looking for ways to more efficiently manage and protect these environments. So what we did with this organization is we quickly engaged. We had a nice engagement with the customer, and we showcased our technology. Long story short, this was a tremendous success for this client. They were able to easily deploy and adopt K10, by being proximate and native to Kubernetes. They simply deployed in their clusters and started utilizing some of our capabilities to provide app centricity and application-focused data management. The end result was this, is our tightness to Kubernetes allowed them to have much more agility and much more flexibility with deployment of data protection policies, recovery of applications, and their mean time to recovery was cut, basically in a third of where they were before, right? Operational simplicity, ease of use. This customer was very, very happy with the feature sets and focus on the applications that we're able to provide by being native to Kubernetes, right? Things that were of additional value were the simplicity of the UI, the simplicity for us to be able to support not only on-premise, but multi-cloud environments. And it really allowed our customer the ability to deploy to the environments that they wanted to deploy in, whether that be AWS, DO, or Azure, but use a common tool and a common management platform, right? Tremendous success. They're a loud advocate of ours, and it's been a pleasure to watch and see this company scale. The second use case that we're going to talk about is security focused, and this is a European bank that is very concerned with security and reliability of recovery. Their use cases also include requirements to have easy DR, automated DR processes, and as you can imagine, being a financial service company, today the logo will remain undiscussed, but we believe in the near term we'll be able to work with them to come forward as a public customer. What we are focused on with this customer is we are focused on providing end-to-end data management and application security. What we provide with this customer is an integrated approach to protect their holistic application, providing end-to-end encryption, end-to-end application security, and automated DR. It's a very easy workflow to move their critical data sets from on-premise to the cloud and back in a very secure fashion. Right, stress testing was paramount. This customer, had mentioned many times that our focus on security, our focus on scale, and our focus on ability to have fine-grained role-based access and encryption was core to the decisions to invest in Kasten. And we're really happy to have them as a customer. And this is another one of those financial services institutions that's deploying us at scale across the enterprise. The third use case that we'd like to talk about is why choice and flexibility matters. So the ability for K10 to have the flexibility of supporting multiple distributions, multiple types of storage infrastructure, and really design out complexity based on investments in cloud native infrastructure was critical to Soprasteria. Soprasteria is a top 5 European IT firm. They provide managed Kubernetes as a service. They provide and support services for many public sector organizations, many private sector organizations. And aside from working toward cost-effective solutions to ensure day 2 operations and compliance, They're really looking for an ability to support very diverse and complex workloads, accommodating customers' technical debt today and working toward a common standardized platform. So this customer really embraced our technology very early from a data protection perspective and saw the flexibility that Kasten drove in by supporting this entire ecosystem. By being native to Kubernetes and supporting the various distributions of Kubernetes that Gaurav mentioned, by supporting AKS, by supporting EKS, and any of these other distributions that are showing up, we've now given our customer the ability to support and manage a variety of different customer environments easily and seamlessly with one common plane. There's another use case that we talk about with Sopra Steria often, and it revolves around OpenShift. And you can stay on this slide. And this OpenShift is historically been a very complex platform. And this customer has a nice use case where they were on OpenShift 3.11. They tried to make the jump to a more current version of OpenShift. And they were looking for tool sets to help them easily move from 3.11 to 4.3 while changing underlying infrastructure, moving from Ceph to RUC-Ceph. By using our tool sets and the native integration that we have and policy-driven automation, we were able to simply back up their environment and recover in the new 4.3 environment. Right? In other scenarios, this would have been a forklift upgrade. By using policy-driven automation, and using the use of transformations along the restore process, we were able to simply recover and migrate 173 applications over the course of 2 days. Extraordinarily powerful when you start talking about our flexibility and our freedom of choice that we allow our customers to have, whether that be different versions or different distributions of Kubernetes, or even a variety of different underlying storage infrastructure that we accommodate. So quite exciting to see what we're doing with customers like Sopra Steria. And our last use case is Onyx Core. And we talk about the need for being easy to use. And these are fun use cases when we get to talk to customers. And the CEO of the company was on a call with us, and they were discussing the imperative nature of having a tool that was easy to use to help their business scale, easy to use to help their organization meet their increased demands and solve the complexity of their cloud native environment. So this organization is in the security space, and they create they create platforms to provide very secure communication and collaboration for their clients. Their applications are scaling. The complexity of their infrastructure has grown to over 500 VMs. And their number one challenge was the skill set that it took to support these very complex Kubernetes cloud native workloads. They were looking for data management, they were looking for day 2 operations, and they evaluated a variety of other tools in the space. As they were selecting Kasten, they opted to run a benchmark of try to do it yourself, compare us to some other tools, versus looking at a tool that was built and designed for enterprise deployment and ease of use. The CEO mentioned to us that it was a resounding outcome. It was, they created a test together for deployment. Kasten, being native to Kubernetes, single one-line command for deployment, simply deployed, ran, and protected their environments for recovery very simply. By the time that they quickly checked in, what they found was within a couple of hours, Kasten was deployed and protecting data already. The other tool sets that they were evaluating hadn't even gotten through the installation process. They did due diligence on the rest of the feature sets, and it was very clear to this customer that Kasten set itself apart. Right, we were extraordinarily simple to use. Right, a single UI, very clean interface, allowing for them to centrally manage their complex distributions of cloud native deployments across their environments. We operated at scale. All right, so we had the ability for this customer to scale up and scale down and operate very seamlessly in large environments, taking advantage of some of our advanced performance capabilities that the other tools simply couldn't accommodate. And more important, is we provided a layer of security that was very comforting for this organization. They really liked our granular capability. They liked our encryption options. They liked the way that we handle and manage data securely from data inception to the full life cycle of that data. So in large part, a very, very satisfied customer, really focused on ease of use. Now what they have allowed, what we've been able to do is we've been able to scale, and we've now tripled the size of their environment without impacting their operation team. Right? One tool, one platform, one management interface that allows them to continue to grow and scale their environment just using K10. So awesome use cases that we have in the field. And as Niraj mentioned before, our adoption really has been unprecedented, right? We've had tremendous growth quarter over quarter. Our deal sizes are getting larger and more, strategic in the enterprise. And I really think that our message is resonating with the feature sets that we're seeing with the adoption, the release of 4.0. More and more of our customers are continuing to gravitate toward Kasten by Veeam. They're seeing very differentiated offerings. They're seeing our thought leadership, and it's really exciting to see what the team's putting together. And I can commit to this. We're gonna keep pushing and keep selling, and it's just it's been really humbling to see how our customers are embracing this technology, using it, and getting great business value out of an investment in Kasten by Veeam. So I think that's all I really wanted to recover. I will probably transition this over to Danny at this point in time.
Thank you, Trevor. And yes, Danny's next.
All right, thank you. And it's a pleasure to speak with everyone. For those of you who I haven't met with before, my name is Danny Allen, and I run product strategy here at Veeam. And what I wanted to do was cover the product strategy that we have in the Veeam corporate strategy, and to explain how Kasten fits into that. And that should be very obvious as we go through this. So our core message, or our core vision on the next slide, that we always say to everyone, is to be the most trusted provider of backup solutions that deliver modern data protection. So to touch on some things that should be very easy and obvious from this, but we focus on backup solutions, and we've been focusing on backup solutions from the very beginning. The reason for that is simple. It used to be that people were worried about losing data because of hardware failures, and while hardware failures still exist and we still struggle with that, we've gotten a lot better. But what hasn't gotten better is things like misconfiguring systems or security. You saw a demonstration from Nick recovering from ransomware. We've been faced with unprecedented ransomware and malware in the past few years. And so we do focus on those backup solutions. And clearly, Kasten is the leader in backup solutions for the Kubernetes environment. The other thing I want to touch on here is the modern data protection, because this is something that is unique to Veeam and core to our strategy. When we started, and this is going back now 12, 13 years, we really focused on, at the time, what was the cutting edge of technology, which was, at the time, it was the vSphere environments. It was just taking off in 2007, 2008. And we looked at that, and while everyone else was saying, hey, I'm going to install an agent and protect that using traditional methods, we said, no, that's not the right way to do it. We want to leverage the vSphere API for data protection and take the snapshots at the hypervisor level. And that built us into, over the next decade, to $1 billion company that we are today. But it didn't stop with that. And clearly Kasten is a part of this. So the first step was VMware data protection. But over the past 5 years, and this is before we get to Kasten, I want to highlight two other things that people sometimes don't realize. One is that we have become the #1 provider of backup for Office 365. We're protecting now over 5 million users with that. And 4 years ago, our Office 365 data protection product didn't even exist. And along the way, the same way that we took advantage of hypervisor-based data protection, we said we're going to take advantage of multiple accounts and multi-threading and streaming in Office 365. Most recently, leading into Kubernetes, we've put a big focus on the cloud. And one of the things that we've been highlighting recently is just last year, we moved 242 petabytes. And that, to get some scope of the scale of that, I tell people if you had written the backups onto CDs, that tower of CDs would have reached the International Space Station. But last year, in 2020, we moved 242 petabytes into cloud storage. And actually, just in Q1 of this year so far, we've moved over 100 petabytes. My point is this, that we continue to focus on these modern infrastructures. A decade ago, that was hypervisors. 5 years ago, it was Office 365 and SaaS. Most recently, it's been around IaaS and cloud data protection. But clearly, we're seeing a shift now, and I think it's the biggest shift in the last 15 years to Kubernetes and container-based infrastructures. And so that is why clearly Veeam acquired Kasten, but why we're so excited by these releases and the traction that we're gaining. So our core strategy on the next slide, if you want to understand what Veeam is doing, it's really quite simple. We always try to have a native interface for the environment that we are protecting. And we've done that from the very beginning. So if you're talking about physical solutions, great, we use agents. If you're talking about virtual solutions, great, we take snapshots at the hypervisor. If you're talking about SaaS, great, we have a specific solution for that for Office 365. If you're talking about Oracle, if you want to go back, we have a specific solution, RMAN. If you're talking about Kubernetes, we want a specific solution that is native for that environment. And that is true in everything that we protect. We have a standalone solution that is designed for that environment. Why is that important? Because when you talk to a company like Onyx Core that Trevor was talking about, they want a solution that runs on Kubernetes. If you're talking to an Oracle DBA, they want RMAN because that's what they're familiar with. If you're talking to a NAS administrator, they want something specific to that. And so this gives us two specific advantages as an organization. One is it gives us a standalone solution that is designed for that administrator, so for the person that is running Kubernetes in the case of Kasten. It also gives us a secondary, very distinct advantage, and that is that we can iterate more quickly. If you take our cloud products, for example, that are deployed out of the marketplaces for AWS and Azure and GCP, over the past 12, 15 months, we've actually done 6 releases. And so by having a standalone solution like Kasten K10, we can iterate very quickly. And here we are clearly at version 4. And so we have all of these native solutions, but it doesn't end there. The middle tier in this is what we focus on holistically at an R&D level, modern data protection. We aggregate all of that. We have what we call the Veeam platform services in our core platform that allows us to take all of those standalone solutions and integrate them together. And that gives us a whole lot of very distinct advantages over time. So one of those, clearly, if we can put it in a common data format, I said we moved 240 petabytes to the cloud last year. We've moved 100 petabytes so far this year. If you can put it in a common format, we can share a lot of advantages over how we store and move data. If you want to use dedupe appliances, great, we can do that. If you want to move it to the cloud, great, we can do that. It also gives us a whole lot of recovery capabilities. We talked with Soprasteria how they really cared about that granular item level recovery. If you put it into a common data format, we can take advantage of all the instant recovery capabilities at a VM level or a NAS level or at a database level. We can take advantages of those data mechanisms that we've built over the last decade. And it's more than just the functions and features of the data management itself. It's also on the reporting. With Veeam 1, for example, we can say this is protected, this is not protected, and we can do that comprehensively across all of the different infrastructures. We can take advantage of orchestration. We know that while backup is the core focus for most of the customers, they also care an awful lot about orchestration. And this is becoming increasingly important, actually, with ransomware. People want to see a document a documented pathway or an actual physical document that says, hey, this is my plan to recover from ransomware. And so whether it be the data management or the reporting or the orchestration, that is all part of our modern data protection. And then of course we take all of this and we have multi-tenant solutions for the service providers. Right now, Veeam has over 10,000 active cloud service providers that are offering all of these solutions in a multi-tenant environment. And so if you ask me, what is the Veeam strategy? This is our Veeam strategy, to have native standalone solutions like Kasten K10, but that can always roll up into a common platform, the Veeam, the modern data protection platform, what we call the Veeam platform, and then offer that out to our service providers. And so very excited about this release version 4. On the final slide, you'll see that they're very focused. We've been very focused both in the core Veeam business as well as in Kasten K10 around Kubernetes, around these same 3 things. And we've heard it over and over from Trevor and from Tom, where we focus on that flexibility. It's one of the hallmarks of Veeam. We don't lock people into a specific file system, to a specific hardware, to a specific cloud. We work on them all. We work on GKE, we work on AKS, we work on EKS, we work on OpenShift, we work on all of the different platforms. And so we're very flexible. It's designed with simplicity, and we win because of that. Onyx Core, we won because of the simplicity of having a purpose-built solution for the Kubernetes environment. And what I tell people is the same solution that runs, you know, on my 1U rack down in my basement is the same solution that runs at our largest Fortune 50 companies. So it's simple, it's flexible, and then finally, very reliable. Our data format is such that no matter where we ingest data, you can always recover that data. It's why people say about the Veeam platform, it just works, because when you put the data in a Veeam format, it allows you to always recover it, whether or not the management console has been taken out by ransomware or has failed. And you saw that when Nick was giving the demonstration. Even if the software disappears, you can recover the data simply by having it in that Veeam format. And so those are our differentiators. We make it simple, it's very flexible, it's very reliable. And this is what we've done with the version 4 release of Kasten K10. We're very excited by this, and you're going to hear a lot more about the integration components coming up at VeeamON and some of the conferences later this year. But with that, I'd like to pass it back to you, Tom.
All right, thank you, Danny. That was a great presentation. And we got a few great questions. We're running a little bit over time, but we still want to take the effort to answer those questions. So I hope that the folks who had questions are able to stay on a little bit longer. I had a question from Bruce Gain around tools. I'll just read it up. What tools or platforms are recommended to help ensure latency when data access is restored in the event of ransomware attack across multi-cloud and on-premises environments? And I think Niraj was asking whether we're talking about latency for time to restore. Bruce, are you still on there? Can Bruce unmute him? Is that possible, Dex? And Niraj, do you want to step in here for this question?
Yeah,
yes.
Hey, Bruce. So let's talk about a couple of things. Assuming you're talking about latency to restore, it's somewhat nuanced, but usually for our restores, we are bottlenecked by speed of object storage in the first part, and then Kubernetes and application bring up on the other. So if things are fast enough, right, generally there'll be very little perceivable latency because you're sucking down at multiple gigabits per second from a single node, and then we can do recovery across nodes in parallel. But there are more advanced options possible. You can have a full DR site that is running on a different credential, so hopefully you have ransomware isolation. And then finally, when you talk about tools, we released an open source project to benchmark Kubernetes storage. The first release has been focused on block storage and file storage in particular, but we're going to expand that also to object storage, and that'll give customers a sense of, for my current system, do I need extra caching on the way? Do I need to tweak my system, or do I get the performance I need? So we're also going to make it easy for the customer to figure out for their particular environment, not what Kasten's, top of the line numbers can do, but for their environment, what is feasible. So hopefully that covers what you were looking for.
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
Okay, awesome. Thank you, Niraj. Thank you for the great question, Bruce. Then I have another great question from Vishal. What steps should CISOs take to securely deploy Kubernetes while also being able to scale the applications in the enterprise infrastructure? Niraj, you also want to take that one?
Sure, I can do that. So Vishal, I think at the end of the day, it's a multi-pronged approach. As much as I love Kasten and data protection, that is one part of a larger story, right? But in particular, talking about Kubernetes, there are CIS benchmarks that make sure clusters relatively locked down. Things like OpenShift come out of the box with more lockdown policies, which are always good. But really, it's a layered security approach where you look at your data, you look at your network, you look at your application interfaces. And in this case, I'm counting the Kubernetes API also as an application interface. And it's a collection of those that will help you. And sometimes it's about best practices. The one thing I will add, we didn't talk about it today, but what newer companies have been doing is all of this is shifting left, data protection and security, where if you look at Leidos, which is another Kasten K10 customer, they run in GovCloud, secured networks for the Department of Health as an example. And every time a new cluster comes up, no matter how small it is, things like Kasten install, policies already there. So you want to shift these things as left as possible in these environments to be able to scale applications, to be able to scale your development teams, to be able to increase velocity of app development.
Yeah. All right, good. Thank you. Great question. Then there was a question that I think is for Danny coming from Chris Evans. Hey, Chris, good to see you. And Chris is asking whether we can talk about which solutions integrate and centrally report with Veeam 1 other than backup and replication. Can you take this one, Danny?
Sure. Yes, I can. So let me talk about Veeam Platform Services in general, and then I'll specifically address the Kasten one. So our Veeam Platform Services has some common framework items that allows us to manage the underlying components that I showed you in that slide, as well as deploy the software itself. It also is a reporting framework so that it can report up, and Veeam 1 actually captures that data and shows it. So if you look, for example, at Veeam Backup for AWS, Veeam Backup for Azure, Veeam Backup for GCP, if you look at all of those products, that data rolls up into both our core Veeam platform as well as Veeam 1 for reporting. So we're on a journey right now with Kasten. We fully and 100% intend to keep the standalone platform, but we're beginning to integrate with that Veeam Platform Services. And what I'll say without giving specific dates is you should expect to see us leveraging the breadth of that Veeam Platform Services with the Kasten product. Now, it takes some time to do the full integration, but you'll see more and more integration as we move forward. And what I'll say is stay tuned. That there'll be some interesting things coming at VeeamON next month.
Chris, was that what you wanted to hear? Okay, I can see that. Awesome. Thank you, Danny. All right, folks, I'm not seeing additional questions. We did go a little bit over time. I think those were very interesting questions. So I would like to wrap it up here.
Thanks, everyone.